Welcome to The Real Math of Business with Eleanor Bennett, where you plus this podcast equals better decisions. I'm Eleanor Bennett, speaker, author, and leadership expert. I work with chief executive officers and chief financial officers really to help them create universally investable companies where people serve people and the math just works. This week, I'm chatting to Cruz Gamboa. But first, we're going to try something a little different this week, and we're going to share a thought-provoking headline. So the headline I've chosen to talk about is Saunas are linked to preventative effects for Alzheimer's, stroke and depression. Why I am talking about this is because this made me feel very triumphant because on a Friday afternoon, I like to go to the bathhouse. And the bathhouse is, if anyone has not partaken in a bathhouse, it is a bit of a round robin of sauna, cold plunge, hot plunge, sauna, cold plunge, hot plunge. And I have been doing that for about 12 months now on a Friday afternoon as a way to kind of slow down my nervous system and really get me ready for the weekend. To be honest, it's felt a little indulgent, but when I saw this headline, I thought, yay, I'm actually doing something really positive for my brain. So that was kind of what made me think, as I said, a little bit triumphant and a little bit of a like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. On a more serious note, however, it's made me think about the very significant and more widespread prevalence of Alzheimer's, stroke, and particularly depression. And, certainly in the workforce, we are talking a lot more around our mental health, and the conditions at the moment continue to be significantly challenging for a lot of people. And so I think on a more serious note, I guess I wanted to just talk about this for a little bit because, Alzheimer's and stroke, very much, medical conditions, as is depression. But I think I'm starting to see more and more anxiety and depression-like symptoms come through the workplace. And if I think about and if I reflect on the conversations that I've had with guests over the past 12 months, we do find ourselves talking a lot about mental health, physical health, and emotional health. And so, yes, from a personal perspective, I was delighted to read this headline. But I think on a more serious note, I'd like to just sort of hold this space for you to be thinking about. For you, it may or may not be saunas, but really, what can you be doing to take care of your mental, emotional, and physical health? Because that is obviously important, but in order to mitigate and prevent, to the extent possible, cognitive diseases and health consequences, I think that's a really important thing for yourself, but also for the workplace. So I'd just like to take this moment for you to think about what are you doing for yourself to make sure, saunas or not, to make sure that you are in the best health possible. And now to our chat with Cruz Gamboa. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Cruz Gamboa to our podcast today. Cruz spent 25 years inside Fortune 500 finance, structured finance, capital markets, and project finance across Latin America, including closing an $800 million power plant deal. He walked away from the title, the salary, and the global travel to build Ascend Growth Ventures and scaling CFO.io, where he helps $1 million to $30 million founder-led companies install what he calls a financial operating system, one model that connects profit, cash flow, and enterprise value instead of three disconnected reports. He is also the author of the upcoming Scaling Profits, the Missing Financial Operating System for Ambitious Founders, and writes a newsletter read by 30,000 plus founders and operators. Cruz, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Lena. It's great to be here in the show with you guys.
Now, you have a really impressive background. You have a deep level of expertise in the world of finance. And so I don't structure this podcast, in a Q&A style, as you may or may not be aware of. But I do like to have a couple of questions teed up, and I like to start every conversation in a different way that's most relevant. And when I was thinking about where to start with you, I think your backstory sounds like it's really interesting, and I want to get there. However, given your expertise, I actually just want to ask you, What do you think the real math of business is? Because I reckon you have such deep expertise. You've probably got a perspective and a point of view that I know I will be able to learn from, and I'm sure our listeners will be able to find valuable as well. So, when you think about business, and I get the sense that this is where your sort of financial operating system comes from, is there are certain success measures that
Mm.
companies drive for. But
Yes.
I think the real math of business, when I think about the concept of the real math of business, it's like lifting under the hood and going, yeah, there's surface level stuff that is generally accepted by the markets, by investors, by boards. That is what would be defined as business success. But when you lift the hood,
Yes.
the real thing that makes businesses fly, what is that?
Yeah. Okay. Now I see where you're going with this. So,
Mm.
well, first of all, I will say that what makes a business successful, it really depends on what do you define as success, right? So, for example, for a founder, success could be creating a company that just gives him or her a lifetime. Kind of like you can make some money, do some like you work with your company and that's okay. For some, that's not enough. You actually want to create something that creates impact. So we have to kind of like start looking
Mm.
at profits and value creation in a different way. For others, it's really all about creating a company that they can sell in 3, 5, 7 years. Okay. So that's a very
Huh.
founder driven approach
Yep.
on how, like, what success looks like. Now, if you want to go corporate, success could be like, well, are you generating enough dividends? Are you like, is the value of the stock going up like, every year? Like, what are the present value growth of opportunities that are embedded into that company? And would an investor believe that putting a bet into your company is going to pay off? So that's why I was like, well, where do you want to go with this? Because we could go in any of these little boxes and go really deep on each one of them. But I'll tell you this, maybe do you want to pick or should I just,
No, I want to hear from you.
yeah. So well, first of all, my approach is exactly to get clear on this. So when I start with a new engagement, I just ask the person that I'm going to be working with, what do you want? And many a times what I find is that they don't know what they want. So for example, I asked him like, well, what do you want this company to look like 5 years from now? What impact do you want it to make? And they're like, oh, I want it to be $10 million in revenue. It's like, well, that's not
Mm.
what I ask. I asked like, what impact do you want it to make? And like they really haven't thought through that. Some of them do, but not most of them don't. Right. So my work starts with answering that question. Like, why are you operating this company? Why is this important to you?
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
what do you want to get out of it? Like, how do you want to live your life with this company? Right. Because in the end, that
Mm.
changes the way that we structure and the things that we measure. But for the most part, what I find is people that are in like, they give me kind of like a middle ground answer where they say, yeah, I mean, I want to help my clients. I want my team to be successful and, be able to retain them and, help them in their own growth. And I also I want to make, I don't know, I'm making it up, $600,000 a year. And for me, that's just more than enough.
Mm.
So if that is what we're measuring, right? So what we're looking for is it's engineering a business that is going to, with relatively low effort, generate enough leads, have very, sort of repetitive processes that can be improved, that can be scaled, okay, and that can allow you to retain the kind of lifestyle that you want to get out of your business. And that is basically, I would say like 70% of the people that I work with, that's kind of like what they want. And I have a
Mm.
couple of founders that I work with that are more like, I just want to build $1 billion company, and will you partner with me on that? And some that are like, hey, I just want to sell it in 5, 7 years. I mean, if we get like 10, $20 million, I'm good, you know? So, yeah, that's kind of like the distribution.
Okay, I love all of that, and I'm pleased. Like, it's so funny. you have your background is very, very finance focused. Yet, what you have said as the opening to the engagements that you that you undertake, that the work is all based on a question, what do you want? Which actually kind of has nothing to do with finance. And I just think that's so fascinating, right? Because finance is all numbers and all the rest of it, but fundamentally, success really comes down to this question of well, what do you want? And that's really scary for a lot of people. I would love to know what are so you said that people struggle to answer that question, and quite often they just kind of give you a half baked answer. I'd love to, maybe if you can use one of your clients as an example, I'd love to know the thought processes that you take them through to get to the final answer. So what's their initial statement or thought? What is their experience? Like, do they look at you when you're like probing them and they're like, Cruz, why are you asking me this question? Like, isn't it obvious? I'd just love to know, because I personally think that is the question.
Yeah.
That is the question. What do you want? Can you take us through what that conversation and that thought process sounds like?
Well, I mean, first, let me share an insight that is going to like it's gonna make everything land so much easier after I say it.
Mm.
90, in my opinion, in my experience, after being in corporate for so many years, and now being a business owner and also helping other business owners in their own businesses, I can tell you that 95% of business problems are actually mindset problems. And also, yes, and also when people think about finance, they think about numbers, but they don't think of
Mm.
finance as being a language. And from my perspective, I don't do numbers. I speak the language of business, which is finance. So I'm kind of like a translator. You know what I mean? Like you say like, oh, this
Mm.
is what I want to do. It's like, okay, these are the numbers. So I
Yeah.
just I think about it in a completely different way, and I see it as my job to basically find the spark that my founders have, and sort of like that creative sort of spark that they can't really put into words. I help them, I tease it out so that we can actually create business plans and create strategies that allow us to accomplish them. Because in the end, a strategy without numbers, it's good, but it's not complete. You know,
Mm.
you need
Mm.
numbers, you need metrics, you need milestones, you need ways to measure whether you're making progress towards the accomplishment of the goal or not, and you need to be able to also parse it out so that if you think of like business strategy as being sort of a cycle that has
Mm.
many steps, like an assembly line, right?
Yes.
And the assembly line starts with lead generation and it ends in cash, right?
Yep.
So between those, between lead generation and cash, you have many steps, right? You have like from lead generation, you go to conversion. From conversion, you go to delivery. From delivery, you go to retention. From retention, you go to revenue. And from revenue, you go to cash. So we
Mm.
have to find the right metrics in each of those boxes that allows us to see where the constraint for accomplishing the objective is. So I use theory of constraints for analyzing and helping my clients accomplish their goals, because basically just using physics. Because I mean, the theory of constraints comes from like physics. So I use kind of like physics and mindset and then numbers to help them to go where they're going. Jaw dropping.
Yeah, jaw dropping. And
Yeah.
I literally just dropped my pen. So what I'm hearing is that actually the biggest shift when we're talking about business and finance, we actually need to be talking about mindset and language.
Yeah.
So if 95% of business problems are mindset problems, what is the mindset problem that most commonly presents itself?
Yeah. It's the one that presents itself in every area of our life. It's fear. It's, imposter syndrome. It's fear of success, which is actually comes from like fear of success. I want success. Well, a lot of people that I know are scared of being successful. And you're like, how is that possible? It
Yeah.
is possible. Yeah, because we all have different stories. Okay. And we tell ourselves that we want certain things, but in reality, we live in a state of fear and we get addicted to that. And the thought of like being a person that is not in living in that reality subconsciously drive us to self-sabotage, to not make the decisions that we have to make, and to postpone the decisions that we have to make in order to accomplish the goals. We do it subconsciously. Nobody says, oh yeah, I'm going to make decisions that are going to go against my own, benefit. Nobody
Yeah.
does that, right? Consciously, but they do it subconsciously.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so most people that you're working with have a subconscious fear, and that could be imposter syndrome, or it could be fear of success, or it could be a combination of both. And we are addicted to that fear. Like, it's the adrenaline that drives us, which actually, as I say that out loud, that makes complete sense,
Yes.
because we run faster because we're running away from the tiger that's chasing us, right? Which is a fear thing.
Which is all in our head, by the way. It probably doesn't even exist, but yeah, we
Yeah,
run
yeah,
away from
correct.
it.
Because
Yeah.
there are lots of things in Australia that can kill you, but a
Yeah.
tiger is not gonna chase me down the street, right?
Yeah.
How do you even get to that point? Like, when you work, I'm just so fascinated by this, right? How do you how in your conversations and the work you do with your clients, how do you uncover that?
I just ask them questions. And the problem is you can't take anyone to a place that you have not been. So I've been there. I've been afraid of success. I've had imposter syndrome. Like all these things that I'm talking about, these are not like things that I read on a textbook. I have read them on a textbooks, yes, but I've experienced them myself in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur, and doing all of the inner work that I do as part of like my preparation as a leader of my clients.
Mm,
I'm very aware that these dynamics are taking place because they play a role in how we manage our companies. They
mm,
play a role in how we manage our leadership, how we show up for our people,
mm,
the way that we communicate, the way that we solve problems, okay, and the way that we're able to inspire others or not.
mm. Wow. So for you, it's really obvious, and it's obvious not only because of your expertise, but also your lived experience.
Correct.
And again, like, you keep saying things, and I'm like, how am I talking to someone that's so experienced in the world of finance? And you're saying things like inner work. And I'm thinking about this person who calls up and goes, "Hey, Cruz, like, I'd like some help." And you go, "Well, what do you want?" And you go, "Oh, I don't know.
No,
Like,
I mean, asking what's the problem?
what's okay. So what do they say
What's
the
the problem?
problem is?" So let's
Yeah,
go there.
it's a trap, by the way. What's the problem is a trap. What's the
Oh,
problem? Yeah, you're
why
like,
is it a trap? Am I going to fall into it? Tell
no,
me.
no, because in the sense that I mean, it's a safe trap, and I'm
Yeah,
just
I know, I know.
asking them. I'm just very quickly leading them
Mm,
to go to the point of like trying to define what the problem is,
yeah.
so that we can actually like get really clear. So I can be clear on whether they are clear on what the problem is, because then
Mm,
if they're not clear, then I start probing. So if the problem is clear, then we go directly to, okay, this is how these are the options. Let
yes.
me ask you some additional questions versus like, are you sure you're defining the problem correctly? Because otherwise
Mm.
we're not gonna solve it, you know?
Yeah, like, if I were to answer that, "Well, I don't have any problems, I just think it can do better," you'd probably probe me and go, "Well,
Well, what is better?
yeah."
Why is it not correct right now? You know, like why is it not enough, you know? So it's like
That's
that. It's just like it's
yeah.
just it's a little. It's using the Socratic method to tease out and just to get to the answer faster. Basically, that's what I do, and I do it with numbers, and I know I do it with language,
So tell me the Socratic method. Just describe that for us.
asking questions. Like I try not to like lead the witness. I just ask a lot of questions, and then by the time 5-10 minutes into the conversation, most of the answers they already have the answers. I'm just like revealing the answers for them.
Huh. So 5 to 10 minutes, you can do that.
In most cases, yeah, yeah.
And is there one particular question that you find is that kind of mic drop moment or that light bulb moment for them? Like, are you kind of leading them through a process and you go, this is going to be the question?
Yeah, but just let's back up for a second. Remember that I'm my business when it comes to finance is a strategic. Okay, so if you had a question about like, hey, should I open this company as an LLC or as an whatever, that's a tax question.
Yeah.
Maybe I can tell you high level, what I know,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't go into this rabbit hole that we're talking about, right?
Yes.
So I'm what the like the framing that I'm sharing with you, it's a framing that is for the more important aspect of finance, which is just basically using it for strategy, just
Mhm.
using numbers to uncover strategy and to frame problems using numbers.
Okay. So, am I right in thinking then? Because I think that's a really good call out that you've said, actually, we got to make sure we lift it up because we're talking about strategy. And actually, all of the questions and all of the conversation, what do you want? That's a very strategic, that is the basis of first principles. What do you want? What impact do you want to have? How do you want to live the life with this company? They are the frame through which everything else has to sit within. So there's that element of what you do. You help create the spark in them so they can really identify and lean into what that is that they want so that you can create business plans and strategies through which to execute. And then you talked about the assembly line, which I loved that you used that term, which high level lead gen to cash, right? And then the job is to identify, and I want to talk about more about the physics and the law of constraints later, but you talked about then finding the metrics that you need to hit along the way to make sure that assembly line works the way it's intended and is able to scale and all the rest of it. Is that right? Have I just described that?
That
I know
yeah,
I've
you just
simplified
that
it.
that high level, my that's basically sort of like my mind, like my frame for
Yeah,
analyzing companies. Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, that's basically what I do. I mean, it's much deeper than that, right?
of
Because there's
course.
there's the actual metrics, there's the actual numbers, there's the actual
Correct.
scorecards and KPIs and all of that. But in a nutshell, I mean, I go back to, like you said, first principles. Let's just get the framework correct so that we can, go back to something that we all understand and we talk about it all the time and go back to it over and over and over again. So we're not like innovating every time we are having a conversation, right?
Yeah. So at some point soon in this conversation, I want to ask you the real math of business ratio question. But before we do that, I'm just
Mhm.
fascinated by your trajectory. How did you get to a point where now you want to have conversations with founders, entrepreneurs, senior leaders to talk about what they want to help them uncover mindset problems um, of imposter syndrome and fear of success and create a spark in them? Like, I don't know about you, but that is not what people would typically expect from a finance expert. Right. Can you share with us, and maybe this is where you I'd like to know what has inspired you. So, what you do now is the beautiful compounding effect and accumulation of everything you've learned and experienced to date, right?
Yes.
And that story is very much like on paper, it's a finance story. Yet here we are talking about inner work, we're talking about spark, we're talking about subconscious feelings and thoughts. In your career led you to going, actually, this is what it's about. This is where I can have the most impact.
Yeah, well, it's lived experiences, right? Like I used to be the kind of person that was more like numbers driven, like every other finance person, and at some point I realized that there was this other world of strategy and ideas and personalities, okay, and
Mm,
beliefs. And when I started realizing that, I started noticing that some people were really effective with very little knowledge of finance, and some people who had a lot of finance background were really ineffective with accomplishing things, accomplishing goals or strategies.
mm,
And I just kept noticing that, and I kept noticing how um, some people in the finance community were sort of like always acted in a technical box, and this is exactly why they couldn't really have a conversation with people that were in the sales department or in HR, because they were talking technicalities and nobody cares. People want solutions. People want they just want the answer. They
mm,
don't need to know everything that you know, right? I mean, you draw it out when it's necessary, not to show how much technical knowledge you have. And some people actually
mm,
um, believe that showing that technical knowledge is what makes them interesting or valuable because it's part of their identity, right?
mm,
They built an
mm,
identity around technical expertise, and they forgot that in the world of business, you do need to have technical expertise, but you also need to have leadership. You need to have the ability to connect to other individuals, because that is where the real flex happens, where you're able to lead and influence and just basically get things done if you value your own way of thinking, right? So if you really want to influence others, you have to connect to others, and then once you connect, then ideas you're able to more easily get your ideas across and get people to understand you and then listen to you.
mm, mm. Was there a point in your career where that penny really dropped for you?
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it probably came after I closed that $800 million deal that we talked about. That was like
Mm,
just, I mean, I don't want to go too deep on that, but it was just like it forced me to rethink a lot of things about myself. It forced me to start looking at myself not as a corporate um, individual, but as a person who had like as an individual who has its own personality and way of thinking and its own beliefs, and who seeked alignment over conformity, and who seeked like more like inner success over what others value as a success.
mm. Yeah, wow.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. Even as you were talking, I could kind of feel myself really feel myself empathizing with that experience for you and that being a real watershed moment for you, because I imagine it would have been really easy to keep kicking $800 million goals and just continuing to be part of the machine, I think you call it, right?
Yeah, the
But
machine.
you actually took that opportunity to go, hang on a second, I think there's a better way. I think I'm bigger than the machine.
I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, yeah, that's how it was for me. And it's funny. I call it the machine, by the way, because of Pink Floyd. Welcome to
Oh,
the
yeah?
machine. Yeah, yeah,
I
totally.
love that.
So I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, and yeah. So I just figured that I've saw so many people. This is how it dawned on me, right? I saw
Mm,
so many people who had spent their whole career at General Electric, and they were just impeccable. They were just great professionals. They were like the best at what they did. And then all of a sudden, maybe some dude became the leader of a group. He didn't like this person. for whatever reason because that person spoke truth, and that person felt, threatened,
Mm,
and
mm,
then those people got ousted. They got removed as if they were just completely indispensable, and they were actually speaking the truth, and they were actually like really great professionals, and there was a
mm,
need from a leadership and from a um, cohesion as a team to have them in the group. So when you remove them, you effectively remove part of the identity of what made that team strong. And I
mm.
saw that over and over many times. And it's not something about General Electric.
No, of
Don't
course.
get me wrong. I love General Electric. It's something
Yeah.
about human nature. Okay. This happens in every larger corporation at all different levels. It happens all the time. Okay. People who have power, but haven't really, they don't know how to wield that power correctly, make stupid
Mm,
mistakes. Sorry, CEOs, if you're listening, but I mean, some of you do. You know, you make irrational decisions. You make
mm,
decisions that have more to do with your ego and not from what's best for the system, right?
mm.
Or you do it for, I don't know, maybe for your paycheck, for your bonuses, and not for what's good for the system. And I see that over and over again. I know I don't. I mean, I don't see it now, but I used to see that
Mm,
many a times when at least when I worked at General Electric, I saw that a lot. And with some leaders, not every leader. I mean, there were
mm,
many leaders that I so respected because they kind of like embody that integrity that I was looking for myself. So I
yeah.
kind of like saw them as role models. Like for example, my last boss, Eric, he was just amazing. He was just somebody I admired a lot because he had integrity.
Mm, mm. I think this is so fascinating. I know we have spent a lot of time not talking about the numbers and the metrics. And I think
Mhm.
that is because that is a given. And we will spend, as I said, I want to unpack that more. So I don't want, why I'm saying that is when I'm about to ask you the real math of business ratio question, and I don't want the fact that we've spoken a lot more around the people and the human side to get in the way of what you truly believe that ratio looks like, because
Mhm.
we could talk numbers all day.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind, this conversation has been so fascinating so far. With that in mind, what do you think? So, when I think about the real math of business as a hypothesis, as a philosophy, I think that it's a combination of people and math. What I have learned, I have no predetermined, this is what it is. And what I love about the conversations I get to have in this podcast is everybody has a different perspective around what that ratio represents and therefore what that ratio is.
Okay.
So I'm curious, Cruz, particularly, I'm even more so curious given this conversation. What
Mhm.
is your ratio for the real math of business and people and math?
So can you explain like what that ratio is? Like what's the numerator, denominator? Like what are we talking
Yeah,
about?
so a ratio is ordinarily a proportion of 100,
Mhm.
right? But actually, we've had guests in the past that have said, you know what, I think it's 100 and 100. So they've gone for like a 200 base. So
Mhm.
it's more like if you think, maybe let's think in terms of energy, right? Like let's say you've got 100 units of energy and you were to share those 100 units of energy across people and maths,
Mhm.
however you define those things. How would you share that energy?
Yeah. So math is just it's when we talk about math, it's just the recording of what people do. So I would say the majority of it is people, and the numbers they just happen to be a residual aspect because it's important to understand at any given time. Like we have the concept of time, which is we know it's relative, but we
Mm,
need we need to have a way to kind of like measure it. But what's important is people. I mean, and what drives businesses, it's people. When
mm,
when you think about a revenue number, the revenue number doesn't create it itself. There's effort, there's strategy, there's hustle, there's drama, there's all these emotions and things that are happening in real life. And
Yeah.
then, oh, revenue was $350,000 for this month, right? But that's just like, to me, it's almost like it's just a picture that you take, right?
Yeah.
That allows you to measure like what was the effort, the combined energetic exchange of many people and customers,
Yeah.
contractors, employees, managers, leaders, supervisors, owners, whatever, right? Everybody's energetic exchange
Mm.
becomes a number.
I love that. No one's defined numbers in that way. A combined energetic exchange produces a number.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah. And
Um,
and 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 the decisions that go um and the level of consciousness that go around it, right? Because I mean we can create a lot of revenue and have zero profits. Or
Tell
we
me
can
about that.
be mindful of revenue and use it as a lever, but also be very careful on how we structure our offers and how we manage our costs so that we do have a profit because we value the ability to generate cash, to reinvest in the growth of the company, in the improvement of our teams, and the creation of new products that allow us to just be better every day. And that is, to me, that's like the most positive cycle that a company can get into.
Okay. Park, pause that thought, hold that thought for a minute. So, this ratio, you've said it's more heavily weighted towards people because fundamentally the number is just just the representation of the effort, the strategy, the hustle, the drama, and all the rest of it, right? So, what would your ratio be?
If I have to put a number, I would say it's the same as kind of like the mindset. It's like 95.5.
95.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is why, remember what I said, you can't, people who get too technical in the numbers, you
Yeah.
kind of lose the logic of what you're trying to do. You're trying to get people to move. You use the numbers to help you make decisions, but in the end, it's your ability to take those numbers and inspired and align and lead.
I'm going to ask a really facetious question before we go back
Mhm.
to this revenue and profit conversation. I'm thinking about those people that are in the middle of a finance degree at university or have just embarked on their finance career, listening to this, going, "What the heck?"
What is he
I spent
talking about? Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Well, not what is he talking about, but actually, I could imagine myself thinking, why am I learning about T accounts and ledgers and all of that? I should be learning about the psychology of humans and how to motivate. And I should be learning about, the levels of consciousness.
I mean, I think you should learn both because we do need to know, how you calculate EBITDA or, what working capital is. I mean, those are
Yeah.
technical things that you need to know because
Yeah.
otherwise, if you don't know them, you can't really understand them. So in those ideas, so thoughts are things. So if you don't have as a founder or as a finance person the ability to grasp an idea and to have a thought on how to convert it into an action, then it's also not good. I mean, you can be in the world of
Mm.
ideas and people, but if you don't have the technical expertise, then you can't really help, you know, the
Yeah.
creation of that reality. For example, the reality of lowering your working capital, that is something that requires effort and
Yes.
requires conversations and alignment and explanations and training and systems and so forth, right?
It's so fascinating because one of the things that really captured my attention was you talked about the world of business. And you talked about the world of business saying that if you just talk in technicalities, you're missing the point because that is not covering the world of business. But you also said earlier that finance is not about numbers, it's about language. And so I love this idea around finance is about language, and we need to be able to have this language in business. Like if finance is the language of business and we need to understand the world of business does need to cover both the psychological element of it as well as the technical element of it.
Absolutely. Yes. I 100% agree with you. Yes.
That's so cool, Cruz. So
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. Like one time I was delivering a keynote, and I was trying different things, and the thing that I said to people, that to the audience, is that my job, like for example, everybody, like I asked them to raise their hand, and I said, well, who in the room thinks that money is sexy? And then like everybody raised their hand, right? And I said, well, who in the room thinks that finance is sexy? And it's like, well, nobody thinks finance is sexy. It's like, what if I could actually show you how numbers can be sexy? Because if I can show you how it's going to make you money, it's going to show you something that you find that is sexy. And then everybody's like, oh my God. It was like the whole room. It just kind of like, it was like a mic drop kind of moment. And like, it was actually kind of funny. I seem to have that on video. It was super fun. But yeah, it's just like teasing people out with ideas that also have
Mm,
to do with numbers, and then
yeah.
demystifying that finance is boring. Finance is not boring. Finance is the language of business. So, and we all of us would do well in at least getting a fairly good understanding, so that we can be conversational in the
Yeah.
language of business, right? We know at least a few things that okay, here's like, these ratios: gross profit, EBIT,
Mhm.
EBITDA, working capital, returns, basic things. You don't have to know it all,
Mm.
but you have to know enough so that you can have conversations and ask questions from the people who actually know more than you.
And this, I think, is a great segue to where I wanted to go. I read you posted something recently about an olive, and I thought that's such a cool story because when we were talking about you need to be mindful of revenue, but actually it's about, you should also be thinking about profit because profit is then what you can do to reinvest and all the rest of it. Would you mind sharing with us the olive story? Because I think that you've obviously told that because it translates really easily, but teaches a really valuable financial lesson.
Yeah, it's just basically it's American Airlines when they remove one olive, right, from a I think it was just from a menu. It like when the combined effect of removing one olive from the millions of passengers that fly American, it was I don't remember the exact number, but it was a ton of money. And that
Mm,
basically it flows directly through the bottom line, right?
mm.
Because it's not just the olive, it's this making sure that the time it takes to put the olive, talking to
Oh,
the suppliers about the olive, it's like all of the things that are associated with managing the process of getting that olive on your meal.
yeah.
So that's basically what we're talking about.
So, yeah, so it's one olive, no one's gonna miss an olive from their plate, but the cumulative impact of taking one olive off the plate is significant, not because of the cost of the olive, but those other costs, in the assembly line that go
Absolutely,
into.
and yeah, and just think about it, in this case, not everybody likes olives. Like, for example, if you get an olive in your meal, you
Oh,
actually just take the olive and just
eat
put
them
it
all
away.
up.
So that's the other thing, right? So you're actually putting something on a meal that probably people won't even care. They don't need it, right? So nobody like you see where I'm going with this? It's like
Yeah.
providing providing value when value is not being received.
So let's talk about, because I know there are so many different elements, paths we can go down, but I do want to talk about this superpower that I think you have, which is connecting profit and cash flow and value. So we've talked about, revenue and how actually we do need to be mindful of revenue, but there's better metrics that you should be focused on. But I think if we come back to numbers and money and metrics, and I think you cover this in your upcoming book, Scaling Profits, you talk about these three concepts. Can you tell us? Okay, so you said that we should know enough to know enough, but we don't need to be technical experts.
Mhm.
If I'm a founder or a business owner, I probably should know profit, cash flow, and enterprise value. And to be honest, I probably, as a founder, probably think I know about profit, cash flow, and enterprise value. What really are those things?
I simplified in what I call the three filters. Okay.
Okay.
So it's basically revenue to profit. So revenue is not the same as profit, right?
No.
So that's the first filter. Like what happens, how efficient are you being running your business from a profitability standpoint? That's the first filter.
Okay.
The next filter is how profits is not the same as cash. So
Uh-huh.
that's the second filter, right?
Yeah.
And what we want to do, what we want to see there is like what are the things that are happening between the profit that you generated and the cash flow that you were able to generate or not, right? We want to understand that. And then cash flow to enterprise value. Because at the end of the day, if somebody's going to run a valuation of your company, what are they
Yeah.
going to look at? They're going to look at your cash flow generation, right?
Uh-huh.
Your ability to generate cash flows, whether they exist or they exist as a potential, okay? Because either somebody else can do better managing your cash flows, or they can take part of the cost of your business if they absorb it, or they know how to do it better than you do because they know how to run it better,
Mm.
or because you have a product, you have a patent, or you have something that you know there's a probability that is going to generate way more profits that are generating today. But at the end of the day, it's all about cash flows. People value cash.
Okay. So this is so funny because back in the day and small companies, cash is king. But I think what you're saying is that even in the top end of town, or at least, kind of multi-million dollar businesses, cash is also king. But yet we kind of get caught up in these non-cash metrics. And we start to make up for cool like EBITDA, UPAT, all of those fun metrics that have nothing to do with cash. But you're saying actually cash is still king in those big companies.
Yeah, because I mean they're used as surrogate indicators for the ability to generate cash flow, but they don't tell you they don't give you the full picture, right?
Mm.
So through EBITDA, you can measure how much profits you are generated, yeah, kind of like liquid profits.
Yes.
But if you have working capital in your business, there's other ways in which that
Yes.
operational uh, cash flow can be eroded, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even when you start taking like, if you have a capital structure that is heavy on debt, you're going to be paying a lot in interest and in principal. So debt service eats part of your profits. If you
Mm.
have really mismanaged working capital, like really high accounts receivable, really high inventory, then that's also going to suck
Yeah.
cash from your profits, right? And then if you also have your tax position is not well managed, that's also going to also take a cut of your profit as well. So there's all these things that happen, and we just have to know that you have to ask more questions. I mean, profit is good. I mean, if you're managing your business as a founder and you're looking at profits, that's excellent, but that's still a little bit incomplete.
Mm.
Yeah.
Can I then come back to this idea, and I'm starting to land this plane for us here. The work you do with businesses is very strategic. But you start by framing what does success look like based on what you want, and that in and itself sounds like quite a process. Then you take them through these three filters, and you say, are we measuring the right things, and are we looking at your business through these three filters which take us from revenue, which most business owners love to measure revenue. It's the ultimate in vanity metric, right? But
Mhm.
actually down to enterprise value through those three filters. And I'm guessing because you do seem to have a beautiful way of simplifying complexity, you translate that for them in a really simple manner so that they can make sure they're focusing on the right thing. Is that the frame and then the three filters?
You're ready to be certified in my IP. Yes.
I would love to. That sounds very, very compelling. Before we close, I do need to come back to, and if it's too long a conversation, we can park it for the next conversation. But you talked about physics and the law of constraints and how you use that to make sure you're using the right metrics
Mhm.
along the assembly line. I just think it's just so funny. We've gone from let's talk about finance to actually we're going to talk about human psychology and let's talk about physics. Like this is a whole curriculum. How do
Yeah.
you use the law of constraint in that process?
Yeah. So I think of business as a sort of a, using kind of like physics as flow, right? That's what cash flow is important. So
Yeah,
it's a flow problem, right? So if you
yeah,
imagine that you have a pipeline, right?
yeah.
And that pipeline has a certain diameter, okay? And you have a flow rate,
Mm,
right? So it can go you can get um whatever liquid or whatever is going through it, it can go
yeah,
faster or it can go at a slower rate,
yeah.
right? But you also have a capacity, constraint that is given based on the diameter. So and imagine like if at some point on that pipe, right, there were rocks, sediments, or
Mm,
that get built over time, and then all of a sudden, even though the diameter is like this much, you have all these like little rocks and sediments and leaves or whatever it is, right?
yeah,
And now, what happens to the rate of flow? It slows down because even though you're pumping liquids really fast, there's resistance, right?
yes.
And that resistance slows down the rate of flow.
Yep.
So now take that concept and use it for business and think about money as flow, profits, cash flows as the thing that is going through that pipe. So if you have the capacity, you have a business that has the capacity to take a lot of clients, the capacity of the pipe, it's much bigger, right?
Mm,
So how many leads and how many opportunities can you convert and where are they getting stuck? Can
yeah.
like you can be like feeding a business a lot
Yeah.
of like clients, but maybe on the delivery side, it takes you 2 weeks to onboard a client. Okay.
Mm,
So that's slowing down the process. So our job is to identify, if you think about that flow system, right?
yeah.
And our job is to identify the areas that are going to give us the highest opportunity for improving the flow of the systems with the least amount of resistance and all of our rocks or priorities or objectives during a quarter or two or as many quarters as it needs to, and all of our resources and investment need to be focused on removing those um, roadblocks
Yeah.
so that we can get the system moving faster. And the minute we remove a constraint, guess what? We find the next constraint. And that is basically what we're supposed to do. That's how we in my company, that's basically the whole theory of how we do it. I mean, this is not a theory that I came up with, but it's basically the one of the most important principles on how we think about scaling companies.
And this is such a great place to land because I think you've shared with us it's simple. Your process sounds simple but not easy. So the simple framing, very hard to do, particularly to do it on yourself, right? But very simple frame, a very simple way of filtering. Your three filters is a very simple way to go from revenue to enterprise value. Not easy to implement. And then this concept of flow. So simple. And actually, what I can see is the value of the simplicity. I can see how you've just described it makes complete sense. And all the thought that's going through my head is how businesses make that overly complex. And so
Correct.
I can totally see the value of that simple concept extracting insane value for companies, because that is an area that companies are not focused on. Like, simplicity is the superpower there.
Yeah. I mean, you said it better than I could. I just believe that the smartest thing that you can do is to make it simple.
What a great quote to land on. The smartest thing you can do is to keep it simple.
Just keep it simple. Yeah.
That's
If
incredible,
it's too
Chris.
complex, it's still not good.
Ooh, nice.
It's not good enough. It's like you have to like polish it more until it's like so easy that now you have clarity. And when things are clear, things get solved, things get aligned.
I love that. Cruz, this is, you have been so generous in the volume of insight that you've shared with us today, but I know that we've just scratched the surface. If people wanted to connect with you, learn more about what you do, buy your upcoming book, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best way it would be to come to one of my workshops. The sort of my marquee workshop is called Cash Flow Breakthrough, and the website is cashflowbreakthrough.com. So you can't miss it, right?
Yeah,
Cashflowbreakthrough.com.
breakthrough.
Yeah, and it's the best way to kind of like learn about the same things that we're talking about today, and do it in a safe zone, and also thinking about your own numbers and your own journey and what's the problem that you're trying to solve.
Cash flow breakthrough workshop, is that online or is that in person?
It's virtual.
It's virtual. Okay, so everybody can come.
Yes.
I'm guessing, similar to this conversation, that will be such a holistic process that will be really enjoyable. It will be tactically and practically beneficial, but very much, you've used the word aligned a lot today. And I'm guessing it'd be quite a fulfilling workshop because you do it from a really aligned place.
Yeah, those are my two favorite words: clarity and alignment.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, cashflowbreakthrough.com. Cruz, thank you so much for your time today. This is brilliant.
Thank you,
I'm
Anita.
definitely going to be looking up that workshop. I'm going to be getting a copy of your book and enjoy continuing to follow you. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And what an amazing chat with Cruz. And that leads us right into our listener question. And if you want to submit a listener question, you can now email us at realmathofbusiness@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify and we'll hopefully get it into a future episode. This week's listener question for this episode is from Glyn. Dear Real Math of Business podcast, firstly, do you have a name for your listeners or viewers? I suggest the Real Math of Business mob. So the RMOB mob. What has been one, and then the second question is, what has been one of the more impactful conversations you've had doing this podcast, and why did you find it impactful? Each one I've heard is so different. Thank you, Glenn. Well, first of all, Glenn, thank you. The Real Math of Business mob, and, I say that it doesn't sound as good as the RMOB mob as it's written. I actually love it. So, and actually, I'd never really thought about having a collective name for listeners and viewers, and I love that as an idea anyway. So, firstly, thank you for kind of putting that into my spectrum of awareness. And with respect to, it does look so cool on the page. The only thing that's giving me pause is mob obviously has a few different connotations and interpretations, and I want to make sure that it is respectful, and kind of see how that can land in the different environments. So thank you so much for that idea, and for the prompt and the awesome suggestion. I love that. With respect to the second part of your question, what has been one of the most or more impactful conversations I've had doing this podcast? That's a really hard question because every one of our conversations is so different. And to be honest, that's why I love them. And what I find is that each of them are impactful for different reasons. I really love kind of immersing myself into the mindset of my guest. And so I really kind of buy into, I guess, the potential impact of the conversation. Because I do love what I get to learn from each of them because they challenge me and they stretch my thinking. But I guess to answer your question, I thought I would share two. One that was, I guess, personally impactful, and one that was professionally impactful. And the personally impactful podcast um, was the one with Ed Podolsky. And I guess the reason why, and I'm just going to, I'm going to be a bit vulnerable here. The reason why I love that from a or why that was impactful from a personal perspective is because I have carried quite a bit of imposter syndrome as it relates to being a finance professional and certainly even running a podcast around the real math of business. I definitely did not excel at any of the subjects at university relating to maths, economics, econometrics, accounting. If you were to look at my transcript, they were the ones at the lower end of the spectrum. And so when I spoke with Ed and when I heard him talk about the math of business, I felt validated. It made me think, oh, maybe I do know something. Maybe I do know something. Maybe I'm not as dumb as I thought I might have been. And so to be able to talk at that level with a professor of economics, it just felt very personally validating. Like maybe I've got something here. So that was personally impactful. From a professional perspective, the podcast that comes to mind from what was most professionally impactful was the conversation I had with Bill Withers. What I love about that and why that is the one that I've called out is he's really challenging how our financial system could look like. I aligned with a lot of the principles that he shared as to why we need to challenge the way our financial systems looks like. And I guess that is why I found that conversation at a professional level really impactful, to think that there are people that are thinking so much bigger. That's very inspiring for me. Um, and as I said, I happen to align with a lot of the things that he was saying and how our financial system could look different in a way that will benefit more people, but I personally think will benefit our country as well as it relates to innovation and financial prosperity and things like that. So I would say the conversation with Bill was probably one of the more professionally impactful conversations. Yeah, I could have named them all, but if you pin me down to the wall, which is I know what I do with my guests every time, those are my answers. I hope that's helpful. Thank you again, Glenn. That was a great question. I love that. I appreciate your viewership and listenership. And thank you all for listening to The Real Math of Business with Eleanor Bennett. If you liked this episode, remember to subscribe for more content and stay on top of The Real Math of Business. I've been Eleanor Bennett. Thank you for listening.